Relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, tomorrow in Germany, Nina Meinke is set to return to action against her old buddy, Karina Kopinska. This will be Nina Meinke's second fight since having dropped a decision to then champion, then IBF featherweight champion, Sarah Mahfoud. This will be her second fight since having dropped that decision, her third fight overall this year.
She's been busy.
Nina Meinke, who's been around for years. Nina Meinke, who sports a professional record of 13 wins, 3 losses with no draws, 3 knockouts, having only ever been stopped once, just once. That was at the hands of Katie Taylor years ago.
Nina Meinke, a serviceable fighter. Nina Meinke, a southpaw.
Nina Meinke, who's 29 years old, certainly not the youngest fighter, but far, far from the oldest. Many good years left in her career.
Why is she fighting Karina Kopinska for a second time?
Her and Karina first met in 2016, and this appears to be a maintenance fight, a keep busy fight, just getting a couple of W's in the column, getting some rounds in the bank. That's what this appears to be, putting distance between herself and the points decision loss to Sarah Mahfoud.
Karina Kopinska, Bohana Libazuska, Edina Kiss,
Simone de Silva, Deborah Rengifo, that kind of fighter. The kind of fighter you fight when you just want to get an easy W, get a little bit of work in, keep the tools sharp, and stay busy. It's that kind of situation. And the relevance of this story isn't necessarily the fight itself, but that Nina Meinke is still around today's featherweight division that is fast being populated.
You need to compete at a certain level to beat Nina Meinke.
And because Nina is experienced, because she's shared the ring with the likes of Katie Taylor and Alina Thiessen, Sarah Mahfoud,
because this is a fighter that's been around the block, and because this division is fast filling up with young unbeaten up-and-comers, talented fighters.
Fighters, amateur standouts like Sky Nicholson,
Karis Artingstall.
unbeaten up-and-comers like Nina Meinke's own countrywoman, Sarah Liegman,
Yeah.
Sophia Leash,
Yeah.
one of my personal favorites, Raven Chapman, who was very recently in action against former champion Jorgelina Guanini of Argentina. The featherweight division is teeming with talent, and in years to come,
Hell, as soon as next year, Nina Meinke might end up crossing paths with one or some, if not all, of these fighters.
so it's important that she stay busy, stay active, stay sharp.
And that's what she's going to be doing opposite the ring, Karina Kopinska, tomorrow in her native Germany.
So long as Nina can keep herself in the winner's bracket, she will remain a serviceable fighter, a serviceable southpaw.
Nina on points is the pick.
One division south in the super bantamweight division, the Ellie Scotney versus Mary Romero EBU title fight has since been rescheduled since the cancellation of Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. Now, Romero versus Scotney is set to go down on October 29th. Yafai versus Rodriguez is set to go down early next month on the 5th. And Shannon Courtney's long-awaited, long-anticipated ring return, that's going to go down December 10th on the undercard of Warrington versus Lopez.
You know that Ellie Scotney was very pleased with the news. She's now going to be fighting on the undercard of Katie Taylor versus Karen Kerbahal.
Set to go down later on this month, on the 29th. These fighters, these undercard fighters, were caught in the crossfire of the controversy, Conor Benn and his failed VADA test.
Their schedules were so affected through no fault of their own.
The silver lining here was that Matchroom still has several shows they're doing this year, several cards coming up, several undercards that were not yet set. So it was fairly simple.
Fairly easy to reschedule these fights. So Romero versus Scotney is now on the undercard of Taylor versus Carbajal.
Yafai versus Rodriguez is now on the undercard of Bivol versus Ramirez.
Shannon Courtney's upcoming fight is on the undercard of Warrington versus Lopez.
Particular to Shannon Courtney, this has to be welcome news, because if they weren't able to reschedule her fight this year, this entire year would have been a complete wash for Shannon. It's already...
Her decision loss to Jamie Mitchell, that was late last year.
This year, most of it is all but over. The least they can do for her is get her out there at least once before this year is out, so she'll go into next year, be able to hit the ground running, do something bigger, maybe have that rematch with Jamie to win that WBA title back.
Very good of Matchroom to reschedule all of these undercard fights in a jiffy. They didn't waste any time.
You'll have to see it. And just in keeping with the theme of the fallout created by that fight's collapse, Conor Benn is now facing a ban of up to 4 years with UKAD to launch a probe into his positive drug test after Chris Eubank Jr. bout was postponed. Dad Nigel, he insists that my son is no cheat. Sportsmail understands the UK Anti-Doping Agency will write to the testing body who collected his sample, the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, to request the analysis around the 26-year-old adverse finding for clomiphene at the start of September.
And this ain't the kind of substance that occurs naturally in a man's body.
There are only so many ways a substance like this could find itself in a man's body, you understand. So Conor Benn is hard-pressed to come up with answers to avoid a potential 4-year ban.
But 4 years, doesn't that seem a bit harsh? I mean, the people at the BBBOC and UKAD,
they didn't issue out Billy Joe Saunders a 4-year ban when he tested positive for that Flonase or whatever it was, and that was based on VADA's findings the same way that this is based on VADA's findings.
Since when did the BBBOC start taking cues from VADA when they work in tandem with UKAD? UKAD didn't find anything in his test results.
As the national doping watchdog, only UKAD have the authority to issue a doping charge, but VADA have indicated to us that there are no contractual roadblocks to them handing over documentation concerning UK fighters.
You can expect that to change.
Based on how this plays out, you can expect the contracts between fighters, their promoters, and those who enlist the aid of VADA for anti-doping testing ahead of a fight. You can expect that the way contracts are structured moving forward...
The way the contracts are structured moving forward, there's going to be a certain level of privilege. There might be.
To minimize liability in situations like this, there had been concerns within the anti-doping community that their finer details of any agreement between VADA and a boxer for pre-fight testing could be protected by the terms of their contract, with sources saying that can be a stipulation when a private testing agency is brought on board by a promotion, and that's what VADA is, a private anti-doping testing agency, a voluntary anti-doping agency.
VADA ain't got teeth. UKAD does.
The most that VADA can do is conduct the testing and report the findings to the affected parties, but that's where the buck stops. They ain't got the teeth to suspend somebody or issue out any kind of a ban. UKAD, however, they do, because they work in tandem with the BBBOC.
But therein lies the dilemma. UKAD conducted their own tests, and they didn't find anything.
VADA, whose testing services typically cost the promotion around £30,000, are expected to cooperate. That will clear the way for UKAD to step in, and Sportsmail has learned that the organization do want to press ahead with an investigation. With clomiphene, a banned substance on the World Anti-Doping Agency list, the fertility drug is classified under hormone and metabolic regulators that can increase testosterone in men. Benn could be hit with a ban of up to 4 years if he is unable to prove his innocence or give mitigating circumstances for the positive test.
And clomiphene is a qualifiable substance, not a quantifiable substance. It's not like clenbuterol,
to where you can get off the hook if there are only trace amounts of clenbuterol found in your system. Any amount of clomiphene.
It's not a naturally occurring substance in a man's body, and any amount of it is qualifiable, not quantifiable.
Conor Benn has maintained he is clean since our bombshell revelation on Wednesday and has not been charged with a violation, but has not said if he has requested a test on his B sample, nor has he explained how the substance came to be in his system, with the adverse finding communicated to his team by VADA on September 23rd, as revealed by this newspaper, barring their statement on Wednesday afternoon, 2 hours after we published news of the positive test. The British Boxing Board of Control have remained silent for much of the saga. It seems like the BBBOC and UKAD are trying to nail Conor to the wall.
Benn's promoter, Matchroom boss Eddie Hearn, attempted to challenge their decision to withdraw the sanctioning for Saturday night's fight,
insisting on Thursday that he would push on with those legal efforts as they bid to reschedule a bout worth an estimated £15 million.
And I'm going to tell you something. People do it every day. They get all wrapped up in lengthy court cases for lesser dollar amounts than $15 million.
There are all sorts of legal battles that carry on for months and months and months for lesser dollar amounts than a cool $15 million. So if UKAD and the BBBOC want to drive a hard bargain,
if what they want to do is nail Eddie Hearn's boy to the wall,
this could become very expensive for them.
Doesn't it seem a bit harsh that they would try to issue Conor Benn a 4-year ban?
It does. Eddie Hearn's argument is rooted in the belief that the board cannot act on a VADA result when UKAD are their official testing agency, a stance that was met with incredulity in the sport. Benn's father, Nigel, broke his silence on Friday, saying, "As you know, we're in total shock. I've been with my son for the last 10 weeks, and the training has just gone absolutely the best it could have ever been. He's a dedicated fighter. He leaves no stone unturned, and we'll get to the bottom of this. I love my son, and I know he doesn't cut any corners. He just goes straight at it, 100%.
You know what? Maybe that's the problem.
The idea that the BBBOC and UKAD could be taking this hardline stance with Conor over a VADA test is not akin to what we saw with Billy Joe Saunders.
He failed the VADA test ahead of what was supposed to be the Demetrius Andrade fight.
And neither UKAD or the BBBOC issued out any bans based on VADA's findings.
So why are they trying to nail Conor to the wall?
I feel like based on this, there's more at work here than meets the eye. This could be UKAD trying to make an example of Conor Benn, a high-profile fighter in the United Kingdom who would serve as an example, a deterrent, if you will, to any fighters out there that are doping and just haven't been caught.
His story might serve as a deterrent to them.
But UKAD and the BBBOC will go as far as working in tandem with VADA to nail fighters to the wall for adverse findings in their anti-doping tests.
Even if this isn't how they handled the Billy Joe Saunders situation,
perhaps they're trying to turn over a new page, turn over a new leaf to where they're not as lenient as they used to be. And they want to nail fighters to the wall. They want to make examples out of these guys. Maybe that's what this is?
But if they do go this route, they are forcing Matchroom's hand.
Forcing Matchroom to protect their investment in young Conor Benn. And the reality of it is the BBBOC works in tandem with UKAD, not VADA. And based on the UKAD tests, Conor is clean.
Better be written somewhere in the legalese, somewhere in the fine print, that the BBBOC and UKAD can use results from an independent testing agency
to issue out banments and suspensions. It better be written somewhere, because if the fighter's rights are protected, so long as his tests via UKAD,
if there's no ambiguous language in there, if it's specific,
that so long as the fighter adheres to all of UKAD's provisions as opposed to VADA's, so long as the fighter adheres to their provisions and he doesn't pop dirty for anything based on their tests,
he should be, at least in theory, he should be in the clear.
Because neither the BBBOC or UKAD, in theory, none of them oversee what goes on at VADA. What if human error comes into it? Cross-contamination? What if somebody made a mistake?
Nobody at the BBBOC or UKAD can account for what goes on at VADA, can they?
I don't know, but that's the argument that Conor Benn's attorney might try to make, that since when does UKAD adhere to what VADA says when
we passed all of your tests and you don't work with them, so how can you account for what they say? What if they made a mistake?
Looks like this is going to get messy. Very messy. Finally, in men's junior middleweight news, Danny Garcia believes that being at 154 pounds will force him to show more of his boxing skills. At 140, I was so much stronger than those guys, said Garcia to BoxingScene.com. I just walked right through them, so I didn't have to show my boxing skills. I'm an amateur champion. I was number 1 in 2006. I was an alternate in 2007. I thought I should have went to the Olympics. A lot of people don't know I got a great boxing pedigree. I'm from Philly. That's all they teach out of there is to box. During his days in the non-paid ranks, Garcia aggregated an amateur record consisting of 107 wins against only 13 losses. Yet, as he alludes to, Garcia ditched his usual box-first approach in favor of fan-pleasing knockouts in the pros.
Danny's not wrong. He can't hope to overpower those guys at 154 pounds because a lot of them are bigger than he is.
Danny didn't prove to be all that concussive a puncher as a welterweight. The guys that he did knock out, those weren't natural welterweights. Those were smaller fighters that moved up in weight. I mean, you think about the Ivan Redkach fight. That fight went the distance, and Ivan Redkach is a guy who was stopped by John Molina at 140 pounds. He went the distance with Danny at 147.
Danny lost something on the way up. His power at 147 isn't what it was at 140.
And now that he's at 154, his power at 154, it isn't even what it was at 147. I fell in love with my power in the pros, continued Garcia. I was just so much bigger than people, and I was just walking them down. I think that's what cost me a little bit at 147, just trying to knock everybody out. For now, Garcia will sit sift through the current landscape at 154 pounds in search of his next opponent. But while he's all for mouth-watering showdowns against undisputed champion Jermell Charlo, Garcia has openly confessed that he would also be interested in facing Erslandy Lara at a catch weight of 155 pounds for his WBA regular middleweight title. I love that fight for me. I love that fight for me.
The WBA have ordered a fight between Erslandy Lara and Gennady Golovkin as part of their title consolidation campaign.
And we'll see if we actually get a fight out of that. Danny Garcia sat out all of last year, and he's only boxed once this year. Not exactly conducive towards fully acclimating to the junior middleweight division. In his last fight, he made his junior middleweight debut against the welterweight who moved up in weight the same way that he moved up in weight, Jose Benavidez. Jose Benavidez wasn't an established junior middleweight. He didn't go on to beat anybody good there, establish himself as a solid fighter there, so beating him there, it doesn't really mean much.
If that turns out to be the only fight he has this year, and it's looking like it's going to be.
Beat Jose Benavidez at 154 pounds, for Christ's sake. He's not one of the established guys at that weight. He ought to be facing former champions like a Jason Rosario or a Julian Williams.
A guy like Tony Harrison.
Let's just be honest here. Let's be honest with each other, and let's be honest with ourselves. Does Jose Benavidez represent any of the best and brightest fighters at 154 pounds? Is he one of the best guys at that weight?
How much credit are we supposed to give Danny for beating Jose at 154?
Terrence Crawford knocked this guy out years ago, back when he was an unbeaten fighter at 147.
You know what? A lot of the Haymanites, a lot of the PBC shills, they didn't want to give Terrence any credit for that.
Saying that Jose Benavidez was a fighter of limited mobility because he'd been shot in the leg before. Well, that hasn't changed. He's still a fighter of limited mobility, and the difference between Danny and Terrence is Danny couldn't finish the guy. Danny couldn't take him out.
Terrence did. You didn't give Terrence any credit for that, but we're supposed to give Danny credit for this?
I don't think so. You know what I think? I think Danny's just biding his time, waiting out the situation at 154 pounds, because what he's banking on is all those alphabet titles becoming vacant in the near future. He figures Jermell's not going to stay here forever. He can't.
And remember that Danny's not all that active. He sat out all of last year. He could have had that Jose Benavidez fight last year, but he skipped the whole year.
He's only fought once this year.
On that kind of schedule,
He can effectively circumvent most of the risky fights and solid fighters at 154 pounds because he barely fights himself.
what it is.